Today is Friday, September the 16th, and we are in the boardroom of the Athens Regional Library. I am speaking with Mr. Robert R. Nichols. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
N-I-C-K-E-S.
And Mr. Nichols, what does the R stand for?
Price.
Mr. Nichols, would you tell me something of what you experienced during the era of World War II?
Well, during the era of World War II, I started at the University of Georgia, and then I was at school in my junior year, and I went to Fort Hood, Texas. From there, I went to several other different military installations and ended up in the Corps of Engineers. I was a member of the 1485th Engineer Maintenance Company, and I had a sergeant, a buck sergeant, 3 stripes. And I was just a young person, 19 years of age, and this was a specialty company, made up of people who had been experienced all types of repair, all types of anything that had repair to do. So they put me in charge of all the spare parts, which I had to learn, I had to know, which I did. And we left. We had a call for active duty, not active duty, we had a call for overseas duty, which we left San Francisco on December the 16th. Let's see. 1944. And from there we proceeded to different places. We were on board quite a long time. It so happened the company I was in consisted of 185 men and 6 officers. And when we got on board, there wasn't any place for us. They didn't have any room, so they put us in the secretary ward, which would be great because we had a mattress and springs, which nobody on board ship had. I slept on something that was hard as a rock, 6 high, on the ship, and it had a little comfort. And from the United States, we went to New Guinea, and to Leyte, and to Luzon, and into Japan. And we were one of the first LSTs to get into Bay. But we were not a combat unit, but we did see some along the way. You had to be regardless of whether you're going to be in combat or whether you weren't.
So was your ship sent into the Battle of Leyte Gulf?
No, sir. We weren't in that battle. We were support troops to come in, the main force in to repair what had been done to see that they could advance the troops. And we stayed until things were over, and after the atomic bomb, then we went on in. We were going in if they dropped the bomb. If they hadn't dropped the bomb, I wouldn't be here today. But where we were supposed to go in was like a horseshoe, and the Japs let us get in, then close under water where the ship couldn't back out, and we were just sitting ducks. But I'm just glad it happened. It had to happen. A lot of us GIs on that wouldn't have come if we hadn't had that.
What was the name of the ship on Japan? Do you recall?
Yeah, I think let me see. We landed on the island Kyushu in southern Japan.
How old were you in 1945?
1945? Well, I was born in 1903.
That answers that. Can you recall for me where you were when you heard the news of Harbor and December 7, 1941?
Yes, sir. I was a freshman, let me say 1941. I was a sophomore at the Georgia Military College in Milledgeville, which I completed and graduated from junior college in June of 1942, and came straight to the University of Georgia as a junior.
And what was your major at the University of Georgia? What did you study?
I was in business school. And I was released from service. I had 12 months of college left, and I came back and I got a degree in education.
Well, let's go on and talk about your career after the end of World War II. If you pursued the field of education, were you on the GI Bill when you returned to the university?
I had 1 year of college left, and I was on a GI Bill, which it helped me get through college. I majored in education. Of course, I had business prior to World War II. I didn't want to teach after I got out. I had an opportunity to go to a company in which my father had been a sales representative of Lawrence Glass Company in Lawrence, South Carolina, in which I found out they were the finest company a person could ever go with. I really found out they were great because in 1952, I was recalled to active in the Korean War. I was in a reserve unit in Athens, Georgia, but they picked me because my MOS number was unit commander.
MOS number?
That's a number that you have that they give each person, which position, what job they have. That's what they call it. I've forgotten what it is right now, but I was, like I said, when I came back to university, I graduated, and when I graduated, I was commissioned as second lieutenant in the not in the cavalry. That's what I was in. But now it's all mechanized, tanks and all that. So when I got up to be a first lieutenant, bam, they took me out of a unit here in Athens, Georgia, and sent me to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to the 44th Heavy Tank Battalion, 82nd Airborne. And I was with service from January, first part of January 52 until the last of October 52. I was originally in for 18 months, but they cut it to 9, which I was so glad. And then I came back and went to work with the same company that I had been with before.
Remind me again where you were sent, what base during the 1952?
I just went to base.
I see.
Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
And your work there involved?
I did a little everything because I had a lot of experience in World War II. I trained troops, taught classes of different descriptions. I coached the 82nd Airborne football team. Did just anything that had to be done, I did it. And I was one of the few officers as a first lieutenant that pulled post officer of the day, which calls for the rank of major or above, but they didn't have any. So they selected me to do that, which I felt it was an honor.
So when that period ended, 1952, was that you were released before the end of the Korean conflict?
I was released I think October 26th, October 29th, I believe.
52.
Of 52.
And did you go back to Lawrence?
I went back to Lawrence Glass out of Lawrence, South Carolina to work, which they paid me the difference between a first lieutenant and what I was making prior to being recalled to active duty, which I felt an obligation to go back. Because I had just bought a home in Athens, and 3 days after I bought it, I got my orders to active duty, which was a shock and a blow, which anybody could understand. And I stayed with that company until I went with them in September 1947 when I first started with them. Of course, I was out for 9 months in 1952, came back with them and stayed with them until May of 1970.
And what was the name of that reserve group?
The reserve group
Yeah.
in Athens?
Yes, sir.
It was the 80, I'm almost positive, it was the 81st Infantry Division.
Thank you. Where was that home that you bought, and then 3 days later?
495 Holman Avenue, Athens, Georgia.
No, well. And were you able to return to 495 Holman Avenue?
Yes, sir. And in 1962, I built a home on Woodward Way in Athens, Georgia.
Where is Woodward Way?
Woodward Way is out in 5 Points in the vicinity of the St. James Methodist Church.
Mm-hmm. I do know that. Did you ever raise a family?
Yes, sir. I was married to a lady, Elizabeth Mann, in 1948, and we had one son, Christopher Rice Nichols.
Where is he?
He is now living in Bogart, married, has 2 little boys, and he is now the sales rep in the floral business and Reeves Florist in Gainesville, Georgia.
Let me take you back in time to ask about the era before World War II and to ask about your own upbringing. Where did you grow up, and did you have brothers and sisters? Can you describe your
Yes, sir.
background?
I was born in Lawrence, South Carolina, July the 6th, 1923. My father was in the wholesale grocery business. And in 1935, he received an offer to go to work with Lawrence Glass, which he'd always wanted to do. And he received that, and he got it, and we had to move to Decatur, Georgia. So I entered the 7th grade in Decatur, Georgia at Winona Park Grammar School. Graduated from there in 1936, attended Decatur Boys High School, and graduated from Decatur Boys High School in 1940. My mother and father had 2 children. I have an older sister that's 5 years older than I am, and she was a graduate of Lawrence High School in Lawrence, South Carolina. She's a graduate with honors at Agnes Scott College in Decatur. And one of the honors she got was the Hopkins Jewel Award, which anybody that's associated with Agnes Scott would know that's a really fine honor. And she majored in music and piano. And she lives at the present time, she lives in Landrum, South Carolina, out of Landrum, between Landrum and Tryon, North Carolina, on the top of a mountain. Beautiful place.
What is her married name? Did she?
Her name was, she married a gentleman named Alan Calhoun from Tryon, North Carolina. And they had 4 children, three girls and a boy. Her husband is deceased at the present time, but during their lifetime they had a very, very happy marriage.
And so, you graduated from high school in Decatur, Georgia?
Decatur Boys High School.
And you went from there to Georgia College in Milledgeville?
Georgia Military College in Milledgeville.
And can you describe the regimen of the military college? Was it tough to adapt to?
No, sir, I liked it. I had 4 years of ROTC in high school, and when I went to Georgia Military College, it was just second nature. I've always liked it, and I like to be on time. I like to do things when I'm supposed to do them, and I've just been that way all my life. I like to be regimented to do certain things.
Can you describe the course of study at Georgia Military College in those days?
I took just a general studies in arts, they called it. That's what my diploma was. Just a general overall of everything that you can take for your first 2 years of college to prepare you for most anything you wanted to take your final 2 years.
Was that a 4-year school, or did most folks move on to another?
It was a junior. It was a high school plus a junior college.
I see. That's what I was asking. So when you moved to the University of can you describe your living quarters at Georgia Military?
I was in a. We had military. We had barracks.
Mm-hmm.
We had double-decker beds. We had everything you'd want. Each person had a roommate, and we had things we had to do every day, all the time. I mean, it was just a military school. We had regular Army military instructors, and it was just a crackerjack outfit. I learned a lot there that saved my life in World War II.
What sort of information
how to handle yourself in combat, what to do and what to do, first aid, and everything you'd have to know. Because we were in it 24 hours a day,
mm-hmm.
and it's not like being in the Army. It's a lot different. You learn because you want to learn. A lot of people in the Army didn't want to learn anything, and a lot of them didn't do anything.
How was the food at the military college?
Real good. We had excellent food.
Let's move on to the University of Georgia, which was a different place 50 years ago. Where did you live? How was the food?
Well, I stayed when I came here. All the places were taken, so my first quarter, I stayed, I can't remember the name of the place, but the varsity was downtown across from the arch, and above it was a hotel. And I stayed up there. And it's just like being out of jail that first quarter. Anybody say, let's go? I said, okay, let's go. And after the quarter, I settled down. But it took that, after being confined, in other words, and coming to a university, it's just two different places. But I grew up in that first quarter.
Did you continue with the program of ROTC?
Yes, sir. So I had 3 years at the university. And I went in service, and I came back and had another year, graduated, and spent 6 weeks at Fort Meade, Maryland, and received a commission as a second lieutenant.
What was Fort Meade, Maryland like? And when were you there?
I was there in the summer of 1947, right after I graduated. You normally go to these summer camps between your junior and senior year. But since I had graduated, I had to go then. It's just a 6-week refresher course before you can be commissioned as a second lieutenant.
Did you use that degree in education in the course of your career as an Army instructor?
Yes, sir. It helped quite a bit. Lesson planning and all that you have to do. It helped me a great deal.
What was your work with the Lawrence Glass Company like? Were you a sales representative?
I was a sales representative. When I started out, I traveled the state of Georgia, Florida, and I went from Columbus, Georgia, to Montgomery, Alabama, to Selma, Alabama, and everything south in Alabama. I did that until this was from 1947 until 1954, which they took away southern Alabama. Then I had Georgia and Florida. Competition got so strong that I kept telling them, I said, put somebody else to help me. So this other gentleman went with Lawrence Glass, and he lived in Lakeland, Florida, and I lived in Athens, Georgia, and we proved to the company that concentration paid off. Because before, when I worked Florida, Georgia went down. When I worked Georgia, Florida went down. It's like a seesaw. But if you have one person living in Georgia that hits his customers every 6 to 7 weeks, production increase. It's just human nature.
What sort of glass products were you selling?
I was in the soft drink field.
I see.
and the glass food container business. Lawrence Glass was one of the 5 companies at the time that had a franchise to manufacture Coca-Cola bottles. And we sold all soft drink beverage bottles and glass food containers. We didn't make beer bottles or whiskey, anything like that. It was all like in the glass container business. It was like mayonnaise jars and peanut butter jars and all type of stuff in that you'd use in the home.
Have you ever run across these bottle collectors nowadays?
I certainly have.
What do you think of them?
It was great years ago because they had bottling plants in every town. Like in Athens, they had the Athens Coca-Cola Bottling Company. They had the Pepsi-Cola Bottling Company, the Royal Crown Bottling Company, your Dr. Pepper Bottling Company, and all that. I mean, you got to know the people, you got to know the production people, you got to know everybody. It was a good, clean living, and people were nice, and you called on them so often, it's just like being part of the family, which made it a lot easier to do business with.
And yet you stopped doing that in 1954. What have you been doing since you began working at the library?
No, I worked with Lawrence Glass now until 1970.
Thank you. That set me straight.
In 1970, and then I went to work for myself in South Georgia. Then I came back to Athens in 1983. I left Athens, moved to South Georgia, then came back in 1983.
What was your work, and where did you live in South Georgia?
I lived on St. Simon's Island. I was an independent grocery business. And at that time, prior to leaving Athens, my first wife, died. Then I remarried, and we had a little boy named Robert Todd Nichols.
Really?
All my children are adopted. I had the months when I was a little boy and I couldn't have children, so I have adopted children, which I think they're the greatest kids in the world. And then we adopted another little boy, and we had the misfortune of losing him to crib death. He died at 81 days old. But we adopted another child, which is a young man I have at my house right now.
How old is he?
He's 15. He'll be 16 next month. His name is Charles Anthony Nichols. We call him Tony. Now, when I moved back to Athens, I was a single parent, and Tony and I lived together. We rented a home on, my first wife's father was living at the time, and he asked me if I ever came back to Athens, Mr. Wilbur Mann, to come live with him. So I came up and lived with him until his death. But I mean, it was a chance to get back to Athens. And I got into, some friends of mine were in the insurance business. So I got in with the insurance, and passed the state test that you have to be an insurance agent. And I sold insurance. I still have until last year, I had an insurance license, but I couldn't spend the proper time with it, so I didn't renew it for 1994. And then I got out of the insurance business, and I wanted to do something else. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. In the meantime, I married a real fine lady from Hull, Georgia.
Yes, sir.
Willie Epps was her name. And she, until her health got real bad, she used to help elderly people, which that's what she liked to do, is to help folks. And she did that for a long time, until 2 years ago, until she had to have some surgery, and she just didn't get over it like she should have. So I told her just to don't worry about it. We'll make ends meet. So I've been with the library. I came here in November the 28th, 1988, with the Council for Aging, and worked here for a few months, and I liked it. And I asked around. I said, I'd like to speak to the lady in charge of this library, please. They said, it's Miss Ames. I said, well, that's fine. I'd like to speak with her. So I got permission and went upstairs and talked to her and told her that if anything ever came about, that I'd like to work for the library. So it just so happened that one position came about, part-time, which it was in circulation, which I worked there part-time. Then something else came in technical services, part-time, so I worked down there part-time. So to make it'd be a lot easier, something else came that was going to be a full-time job in technical services, so I transferred from circulation to all my time down in technical services, where I am now. So I've been on the Athens Regional Library payroll since May the 1st, 1989.
Very good.
Which I love my business. I like what I do. I always like to be on time, which I am. I mean, it's a great place to work. And I just like all employees are nice and polite and great. So I just really enjoy what I do.
How did you come to meet your current wife?
A friend of mine that I sold insurance with, she said, "I have a lady I want you to meet, Bob." I said, "Well, okay." I wasn't married, you know. I said, "All right." And so we went out to Ryan for lunch. And of all things, I bit down on something and busted an inlay. $300 worth. I said, "Man, this is going to be something else." But we met and we went together for quite a few months, and we just fell in love with each other, and we just decided to get married, and she has done wonders for my son, because a man can't do it by himself. He can try, but it just takes a lady to make a home, in which I really have married to a lady.
Let me take you back to the years of World War II and ask where you lived as you were in basic training, or I imagine you're an officer. You're in. Well, where you lived before you were sent overseas?
God, I can't remember the names of the different military bases.
Too many of them?
The only way we got out of the state of Texas was go overseas. That's the way it is. We were all over the state of Texas.
How did Texas seem to you?
It was all right. It was fine.
Was it hot weather there?
Hot as it could be. It just got us ready for the Philippines, because it was hot over there.
And am I right? It was the Army.
Yes, sir.
And can you describe the barracks in the Philippines? What sort of stations? What sort of places?
Well, when we first got there, we lived in a rice paddy, just about. It was nasty and dirty and sloppy, and then we finally, when we got into Manila, we went to a place called Santa Ana, and we had 55-gallon drums, one on each corner for 4, built a platform and put up a 2-man tent. Because the water got so high, it rained so much, you had to get up high. That's the only place we could keep dry.
Did you meet some of the Filipino people?
We've met them, but I mean, it didn't take time. I just didn't cross my mind to have much to do with them. Because you didn't know. You were afraid in a way. You didn't know who they were or whether they were for you or against you. And so the best thing to do is just stay away from them.
Was there anything you were particularly afraid of during those years? Anything that could be particularly frightening?
Well, anything when especially when you're out in a ship and you're going overseas, we had sub-alerts and we had air alerts and we had all this stuff. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, you sweat like the Dickens and hope and pray that nothing happened. I mean, if you weren't scared, anybody to me that said they wasn't scared is just a liar. That's the way I feel about it.
So you're in the Philippines after they've taken back Manila.
That's
the
right.
Allied forces. And from there, you were headed with the forces that were marshaling for the invasion of Japan.
That's right. We were preparing for the invasion of Japan when they dropped the bomb.
Where were you at that point in August?
We were in Manila, in the Philippines,
Mm-hmm.
getting ready to prepare to get ready to go. And like I told you before, we went in at the same place that we were going to go in.
Did you move from island to island as an army, or were you most of the time around Manila?
Like I say, we went in from, we came in from New Guinea, Leyte, into Luzon, and on into Japan.
Thank you. Could you tell the difference between those New Guinea, Leyte, Luzon areas?
No, they were just all hot.
Did you see a lot of rain down there?
Yes, sir. Lots of rain. You get used to it, you just don't think anything about it.
You get all pruny?
What?
Did your skin? kind of-
Yeah. Yeah, your skin turns yellow and everything else.
How was the food? This is one of those details of everyday life that I try to ask.
Well, army chow on board ship, I think, was about as worst I've ever eaten in my life because we had to stand up all the time, and hot, and everybody was getting sick and all that stuff. It's just, it wasn't too good, that's all.
What did you all think of Douglas MacArthur at the time?
Well, he was our commanding officer, and so you didn't say anything about him. You just go ahead and did your job.
And FDR, what did you think about him at the time?
Thought he was a good president.
Do you remember when he died?
Yes, sir.
How did you hear that news?
Just got it. It came over the, I don't know, they just came out and announced it, that he had died, that's all.
Did you know who the vice president who would assume? Did you know anything about him at that
Harry
time?
Truman, that's all I knew, but I mean, I didn't
No.
know too much about him.
Can you describe, you were stationed on Japan after their surrender,
Yes, sir.
I've gathered, in occupied Japan. What was that like under the American occupation?
To tell you the truth, I mean, it's just I really don't know. I mean, they were just people as far as I was concerned. I'd never seen them before. I knew they were scared to death, but that's all I knew.
So you didn't have any Japanese?
No.
And couldn't communicate very well?
No, sir.
How long were you stationed in occupied Japan?
We left there. We stayed there until in the spring, January or February of 1946. And we were coming back to the United States, and we just missed by one day a ship that was going straight from there to San Francisco in 7 days. But we were lucky. We got a ship that was going to be decommissioned in New York, and we had to go all the way down through the Panama Canal and all the way back up the other side.
How long did that trip take?
It took 47 days. It wasn't funny. It was rough. They said, just think, you're going through the Panama Canal and you can get to see that. I said, well, I don't care about the Panama Canal. I want to go home.
What could you do aboard that ship?
Nothing but play blackjack. That's the only thing we could do.
Did you get good at blackjack?
Yeah, I got pretty good after a while.
Did you play cards before or after that
No, sir.
boat trip?
Not anymore. That was enough.
So you hadn't played cards much before being on that boat?
No, never played much afterwards either.
Was there anything, any other source of entertainment? Can you recall any of the other popular culture? Were you not able to do that on that boat? Or?
Well, going over, they had, before we got into real bad situations, we had movie theaters we used to see and different things like that. I mean, they tried to make it as nice as possible.
So,
but when we got initiated, when we went across the international date line. Initiated. Everybody that goes across there. Let me see. The name of that place is. "13 days out, we are initiated into the dominion of the Golden Dragon when you pass the equator. Stripped to your shorts, painted in crude oil, had funny haircuts, drenched with fire hoses, and some of the fellows were chicken and didn't go through it, but it was just all in fun."
Was there any other character who's worth telling me about? Another personality that stands out in your memory?
I met a real good friend of mine. It turned out to be a good friend. Edward Sterling Lewis from Lynn, Massachusetts. He was the first Yankee boy I ever thought that I really liked. And he came to see us in Athens, Georgia, when he came through one time after we got out of service. And in 1978, I went up to his part of the country, went by to see he and his wife and family. But that's the only person that I really cared a lot about in service.
When they called you back up during the Korean conflict, were you already married by that time?
Oh yes, sir. I married in '48.
How did you meet your first wife?
When I came back out of service and had a year of college to go, I met her. She was the secretary to the dean of the College of Education. At that time, it was Dean Adderholt, which eventually, later years, he became president of the University of Georgia.
And I'm wondering also how you wrote letters. Was your wife able to come with you to Fort Meade?
No, this is Fort Bragg.
Fort Bragg. I'm sorry, I am confused.
Fort Meade is when I got out of college, before I got to be commissioned as second lieutenant.
Thank you, sir.
Fort Bragg is when I went back in 1952. She stayed here in Athens and worked.
What did she do for a job?
She was a secretary. She worked at the reserve. Where I was in the reserve, she worked in the office there. They had Army personnel that ran the reserve units here in Athens.
Had you adopted that child by that point?
No, sir. My first child was adopted in February the 10th, 1960.
Thank you. Back to World War II. Could you write letters home? Were they censored?
They were censored.
But you could get mail.
But I had a code with my father. And it ended up just right. I wrote a letter. I miss playing golf with you because I miss laying the ball on a tee. Lay tee. That's where I was. And he knew exactly where I was, and it went through censorship.
That's the first I've heard. That's good. Who else would you have communicated with by mail during World War II?
Well, I had my sister and of course my mother and father, and my cousin, who's this letter is written to here.
Did you save any of your correspondence during those years? Was it?
I had it, but I don't have it now.
I understand. Do you mind if I ask how you came to meet your second wife?
My second wife, she was living here in Athens, Georgia, and I knew of her father, but I mean, I just didn't have any, you know, it just didn't cross my mind. And we met, and we got married, and then lived here in Athens. And, well, and then we moved from here in 68, moved to Decatur for a couple of years, and then I moved from there to St. Simon.
Where did you live in Decatur in 1968?
Lived on Angelique Drive.
And why were you in Decatur with representing Lauren's
Yes, sir.
class again?
They requested I get moved to Atlanta to the metropolitan area.
I see. That must have been quite a boom time for soft drinks and something.
That's right, it really was. It was great.
I know that Atlanta grew a lot in 1968, but did you experience some of the tumult of the late 60s in the Atlanta area in any way?
No.
Things were pretty quiet.
Yes, sir.
And in 1970, where did you move? Where did your neighborhood of St. Simon?
Lived on Beachview Drive on St. Simon. So bought a home on a point in the ocean.
Is that near East Beach or somewhere?
It's on the same street at the other end of where the King and Prince Hotel is.
Yes, sir. Did you remain there for the 13 years you were there or so?
No, sir. Sold the house there on the beach and moved to Darien.
I know Darien rather well.
Bought an old colonial home built in 1836.
And you were still in the grocery business at that point?
Yes, sir.
And would you go from Darien to St. Simon?
Yes, sir.
What was the name of that grocery business? Did you have an office or
No, it was community supermarket.
Was it where was the store?
At the pier section.
Yeah. In the village of
Yes,
St.
sir.
Simon's Village.
That's right. At the pier. That's
Was
where
it the main intersection where the traffic light is there?
there's a traffic light one block up from the pier. It's on Ocean Boulevard where the traffic light is.
How big was that store? I may have been there.
It was just a small independent grocery store.
Like about the size of a convenience store nowadays, or
It was
maybe
bigger.
a little bigger?
We had a meat market and everything else.
I may have been there. Well, did you sell that store when you moved, or
Yes,
what?
sir.
Is it still in business? Do you
No,
know?
sir. It's out of business now, and everything's changed.
Yes, it has. Let's jump back in time again, now that we've come forward. What was Lawrence like in the old days? Can you describe it for me?
I mean, when
Lawrence?
I was a young boy,
Yes, sir.
it was just a fine, small town. I mean, everybody knew everybody and leave the front doors open and everything else, and nobody bothered anything. It was just a nice place to grow up.
What sort of a house, or where did you live?
Well, I was born in a home at 505 West Main Street in Lawrence, South Carolina.
Center of town?
It was up from town. It was on, I guess it's 5-6 blocks from downtown Lawrence. Then in 1932, my father built another home up the street from there, about another block and a half up the street. Built a beautiful home, $3,200. And all they did, the lumber man did, he said he wanted to build it just enough to make a little money where he could pay his employees, and that's all.
Where did you live when he moved with you to Decatur?
We lived on Adams Street,
Uh-huh.
322 Adams Street. Moved there in September 1935.
Was that a nice neighborhood?
Yes, sir. Real. And they used to close off the street so we could play roller skate hockey in the middle of the road. It was real nice.
Could you get around during the years of the Depression? You've described the streetcar for me. Did you lack anything in particular?
No, sir. Those streetcars ran from Decatur to Atlanta for a nickel. I mean, everything was economical. Of course, they didn't have any much money, but we got along. Of course, my sister lived at home and went to Athens-Clarke on a scholarship, which
what's your first memory of Lawrence or that era, the earlier? What's your earliest memory?
Good Lord of mercy. I don't know, my earliest memory, I imagine, was, I don't know, I used to go fishing with my father a lot. First time I ever went fishing, we went to Lake Murray out of Columbia, South Carolina. I caught 19 fish. I said, man, this is the thing to do. And you know I never have caught 19 since.
Were you able to go fishing as you grew older?
Yes, sir. Went fishing with my father. Used to go hunting with him. They used to take me along to hold the mules while they went hunting.
Where would you go? Where would you hold those mules? Where would you go?
We'd go out. He'd go out in the woods. They'd go hunting and ride mules, and they'd take me along with them. And get up about 3 o'clock in the morning, eat cold sausage biscuits. That's good eating, man, when you're hungry.
So around Lawrence, South Carolina, you probably had some places to hunt and fish.
That's right.
And what about when you moved to Decatur?
Didn't go hunting and fishing anymore.
Couldn't go out to the country at all?
Well, you could, but I mean, we just didn't do it. Because he was traveling then. See, when we lived in Lawrence, he was home every night because he was in the wholesale grocery business. And when he moved to Decatur, then he traveled. And my mother went with him a lot. My aunt lived with us then, so it made it where she could go with my father, and my aunt would stay there with my sister and I.
When you moved to the University of Georgia, did you ever find time to hunt or fish?
No, sir.
Too busy. At later points in your life, did you ever, were you able to go back and hunt or fish at all?
Not too much. I used to play golf for a good while.
When did you begin to play golf?
Well, I played golf for just about all my life.
When did you start?
When I started in Lawrence, at the Lawrence Country Club years ago.
When you were growing up?
When I was growing up as a young kid. And then I played in, there was a golf course out from Decatur. Now it's out near where Memorial Drive is, because it's all changed now. But I used to play golf a lot. And when I traveled, I used to belong to the Athens Country Club. Used to play golf out there on the weekends.
When you traveled, would you play golf?
Yes, sir.
The courses in other places?
Yes, it's good. You got a lot of customers that love to play golf, and the best thing to do is take some time off and play golf.
And your father was in the same line of work, representing the same company?
Same company, but see, after I was finished college, they had arranged for me to go to work with them, and I didn't know this. And I had the misfortune that he died of a heart attack in July the 8th, 1947, right after I finished college. I'd been out of school 32 days when he died. And then I went on back, came back for the funeral, and I went back to Fort Meade to finish what I was doing. And then when I came back, then there was a call my mother had received for me to come to Lawrence, South Carolina. They would like for me to talk to me about going to work with them. It was all set up, seeing I didn't know anything about it. That's one of the reasons I never did pursue in the education that I had majored in.
I understand. Did your father talk to you about the region that he serviced? Did he service Florida in the same way you sometimes had?
He serviced a lot more than I did. He worked Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, and part of Kentucky.
So, would he travel by any method available? Would he ride the train?
Train, and they used to years ago during the war, at least 3 or 4 salesmen would all go together. Even though if they were competitors, they'd go together because they didn't have any gas, see? And if your competitor was with you, he'd go in one week, he'd go in one day first and let him get through, and then my father'd go in behind him. And it got to where they knew they were coming, they would just split up the business and give them half and half. I mean, they was just good people, that's all.
Was that only during the wartime years or during the Depression?
That was during the wartime years.
Mm-hmm. Did he ever have? Did he travel under his own automobile to some places, or not far away with?
Used company automobiles, furnished by company furnished us automobiles.
Mm-hmm. Now, as you traveled the region, trains must have began to disappear.
I didn't travel. I did a lot of flying if I had to go to like Washington, D.C., to an international soft drink convention, or California, or something like that. But other than that, I drove everywhere I went.
You've described going to what I've known as Lower Alabama. Did you hit Dothan, Alabama?
Yes, sir.
Panama City, Florida?
Panama City, Dothan.
Enterprise?
Enterprise.
Some of those Army bases down there include Fort Rucker.
I never did go to Army bases.
Never went to Army bases.
Went to the cities outside of them.
Mm-hmm. So you're probably dealing with the bottlers.
That's who I was dealing with.
Urban communities.
That's right.
Were there some that were harder to deal with?
Oh,
some
yeah.
were easier to deal with?
Oh, yes.
Is there anything that particularly stands out in your memory?
No, you've got a lot of people that they get used to buying from somebody, and that person's got to die or something before you get a chance to get in there. I mean, that's just the way it is. After you sell yourself, see, then you get to know these people. You get to know the man, you get to know his wife, you get to know his children. Then after you get to know his children, it gets a lot simpler then. If the kids like you, they where daddy said, "You're so and so."
So you would develop casual friendships
that's right, with
amongst
everybody,
the business relationships.
the whole family. It's got to be, like I said, told you before, it was a pleasure to go because everybody was so nice.
Did you mind being recalled during the era of the Korean War? You mentioned the economics of having just bought a house. Did that make you...
Well, it kind of teed me off because there was a lot of people that never had been in World War II that belonged to the same unit that I belonged to, but they took me instead of taking them. And the only reason the Army would give me that they recall me is I haven't served any active duty as an officer. That's the only thing they could come up with. So I didn't argue with them. I went ahead and did the best I could. Because I told my commanding officer when I walked in, he said, "You plan to make the Army your career?" I said, "No, sir." I said, "While I'm here, I'll do the best I can do, but if I can leave today to go home, I'd go." But for me to go overseas, I had to be a graduate of the Armored School. And since I was fair and square with my commanding officer when I first went in, every time my name would come up to go to school, he'd slide it aside. And he called me and he said, "I can't do it anymore. When your name comes up again, I've got to send you." I said, "Yes, sir." It came up, he said, "You got to go." And then 2 days later, a memorandum came down from Washington. I had to have at least 6 months overseas. I had to have at least go to the graduate of the Armored School and a 30-day leave for me to qualify to go. And I missed it by a week. So he said, "You just stay here, we'll have something for you to do," and I didn't have to go.
Well, your duties at that base, you were training troops
That's right.
during the Korean conflict.
Yes, sir.
Was that a basic training for those new troops?
Yes, sir. I was in a heavy tank battalion.
Mm-hmm.
We went out on ranges, firing tanks and everything you had to do. Everything's had to be done. We were training these troops for combat. which I figured if it was combat and that unit was called, I'd have to go too. But it was a training unit. And we had a commanding general in the 82nd Airborne. He was a small man, but man, he was great in stature. He was a humdinger. General George W.D. Canham. He was a tough paratrooper, my friend. But everybody respected him.
You know, there's going to be some anniversaries before too long of the Korean conflict.
I know that.
The subject comes up, especially with often people were recalled, and often. How do you think that should be remembered, that era?
Well, it was just as bad on them as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Just as bad on people in the Korean deal, just like it was on people on World War II, and just as bad on the guys from Vietnam. Anytime you go to combat, it's bad, because you don't know whether it's going to be you or the other fellow. And if you were lucky, you were lucky. And if you went over anywhere and you said you weren't scared, you're just telling a fib.
Were there some times in the Philippines when you were in combat situations?
I was in a situation, but I wasn't in the actual combat, because we were not combat troops. But we were prepared, and we have been, it's been close. And so it was enough to get worried about and scared about.
Well, I'd like to wind up with a couple of questions.
All right.
I'm gathered that you have not been traveling overseas too much because you've been working for so long. Is there any place you would like to travel to if you could? Have you been able to see the world?
I'd like to go back to Manila, see what it looks like. I really would. Because when I was there, it was just a torn up place. I'd like to go back to see what it looks like.
I imagine there's a 50th anniversary of that liberation sometime real soon now.
I know it.
I'm not quite sure what I've been reading a history of the Philippines. I'll try to remember what that is. The question I usually ask last in these interviews, I don't have to stop right away, but it's just a thought question. If you were speaking with younger folks, younger people, about the World War II era and some of the experiences we've been talking about, what would you underline as being most important? What would you emphasize?
I would emphasize looking after yourself and do what you're supposed to do. Learn what you're supposed to learn, because can't anybody else teach you unless you learn it yourself. You've got to learn. You've got to look after number one first. I mean, that's what I mean, these young people today, a lot of them don't have any knowledge of what it's all about. They've had it so good that they don't know what it is to have to want for something. I mean, that's what they should have to do sometime, is really want for something. But I don't know how it's going to work out for anybody nowadays, because everybody's got most anything.
Well, is there anything you care to add about either the World War II era or your career?
No, sir. Not a thing.
I'm very grateful for your time today,
Thank
sir.
you. I've enjoyed it very much.